Emily Thompson and Detective Mark Rivera never imagined their paths would cross in the deadliest investigation of their careers. One was a missing girl, vanished without a trace, and the other, a seasoned detective, was about to uncover a nightmare hiding in plain sight. What began as a routine missing person report would soon spiral into a hunt for a predator, whose RV of horrors had terrorized children across multiple towns, leaving a trail of fear, secrets, and unimaginable cruelty. It began with a missing person report that seemed, at first, like any other. A young girl, only 12 years old, had not returned home after school. Her parents were frantic, the neighbors worried, but there were no obvious signs of foul play. The police initially treated it as a possible runaway case. It wasn't unusual for teenagers to sneak out or lie about their whereabouts. But something about this disappearance felt different. Her backpack had been left on the sidewalk, her shoes neatly placed beside it, as if someone had deliberately left them behind as a message. Officers interviewed everyone in the neighborhood, trying to find anyone who had seen anything suspicious. Most answers were routine. People had noticed the girl walking to school that morning, or that she liked to play near the park. But one tip drew the investigators' attention. A neighbor mentioned a man who had recently parked an RV in the woods behind their street. He rarely interacted with anyone, and the RV's windows were always covered with dark curtains. Something about his behavior had unsettled the neighbor, though at the time no one thought to connect him to the girl's disappearance. Over the next week, police began to notice a disturbing pattern. Reports of missing children in surrounding towns, some months old, shared similar circumstances. Each disappearance had been brushed off initially, but the timing and locations began to line up in a way that suggested someone was moving deliberately, choosing remote areas where children might be vulnerable. Authorities traced each last known location back to campgrounds, rural streets, and forest edges, places where an RV could come and go without drawing much attention. As the investigation progressed, detectives started mapping these locations. One name kept surfacing quietly in public records: an unassuming man with no criminal record who moved frequently and worked odd jobs. He wasn't a stranger to law enforcement, but there had never been any complaints serious enough to warrant a deeper look. Still, the connection between him and the missing children could not be ignored. When officers finally reached the RV, it was parked behind a thick grove of pine trees, obscured from the main road. Its exterior was weathered and unremarkable, just another vehicle blending into the background. But there was an air of menace that made the seasoned officers hesitate. Something about the way it sat there, isolated and quiet, suggested it had been waiting, watching. They began to wonder if the girl, and perhaps others before her, had crossed paths with the occupant of that small, mobile home. The vehicle, ordinary at first glance, had become the focal point of a growing sense of dread. It was a reminder that sometimes evil doesn't announce itself. It waits, concealed in plain sight, until the right moment to strike. And in this case, the right moment might have already passed. Stepping inside the RV was like entering a different world, one carefully constructed to hide a lifetime of secrets. From the outside, it had looked harmless, just an old, faded vehicle parked in the shadows, but the moment officers opened the door, a heavy, unnatural silence greeted them. The interior was cramped, filled with the kind of clutter that at first seemed mundane: clothes stacked in corners, worn furniture, and everyday objects that suggested a normal life. But as the investigators began to look closer, they realized that nothing about this place was normal. The first shocking discovery came from the walls. They were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, pinned and taped in a meticulous pattern. Each photo was labeled with a name, a date, and sometimes a location. Some of the images were innocuous at first glance: a child smiling in a park, a boy holding a toy, but there was an underlying sense of unease. Every picture had been taken without the subject's knowledge, capturing moments of vulnerability. It became immediately clear that these weren't just memories. They were trophies, pieces of evidence in a personal archive that chronicled a series of deliberate crimes. Officers found hidden compartments cleverly built into the RV's floorboards and cabinets. Beneath layers of false panels, they uncovered small, personal items belonging to children, shoes that had been worn too briefly, backpacks, a teddy bear with a missing eye, even a notebook filled with childish handwriting. Each item seemed to have been collected with care, cataloged in a way that suggested obsession. It was a haunting reminder that the RV had not merely been a home, it had been a hunting ground, a mobile prison where someone had orchestrated horrors in plain sight. Among the most disturbing findings was a journal, thick and worn, tucked behind a false panel in the bedroom area. Its pages were filled with handwriting that detailed the predator's movements across towns and counties, describing methods for avoiding detection, monitoring victims, and creating opportunities to strike. The writing was precise, almost clinical, as if every action had been planned in advance. There were maps, notes on school schedules, and lists of potential targets, some crossed off as if completed. The journal revealed not only a pattern of crime, but also a chilling detachment. The man viewed his acts as a game of strategy rather than acts of violence against innocent lives. As the investigators combed through the RV, a sense of suffocating dread settled over them. The vehicle had been designed to be ordinary, inconspicuous, but it concealed a level of depravity that defied imagination. Every corner, every hidden nook told a story of control, planning, and terror. The RV was more than a vehicle, it was a symbol of the predator's ability to move freely, to manipulate the world around him, and to escape the notice of society. It was a reminder that monsters often wear the mask of normalcy, hiding their darkest impulses behind walls that seem familiar, safe, and unassuming. In that moment, the officers realized that the horror of the RV was only the beginning. As investigators dug deeper into the life of the man behind the RV, a chilling portrait began to emerge. To the outside world, he had been unremarkable, quiet, polite, and even somewhat friendly to neighbors who occasionally crossed his path. He had held a series of odd jobs, nothing permanent, always moving from town to town, never staying long enough to form lasting connections. To those who knew him casually, he was just another solitary figure blending into the background. But behind this ordinary facade lay a mind capable of meticulous planning and unimaginable cruelty. Psychologists brought in to profile him were struck by the duality of his existence. He had mastered the art of compartmentalization, living two completely separate lives simultaneously. By day, he appeared as a harmless man, possibly even a caring father figure in fleeting interactions. By night, or during the long stretches spent traveling in his RV, he became a predator, carefully selecting victims, studying routines, and documenting each encounter. The journal, the hidden compartments, the photographs, it all painted a picture of someone who viewed human life as an elaborate puzzle, one he manipulated with cold precision. Every piece of evidence suggested he was more than just opportunistic. He had spent years perfecting his methods, learning how to evade detection, and studying the behaviors of law enforcement. His meticulous documentation indicated a strategic mind that saw potential obstacles as challenges to overcome rather than barriers. Each crime was premeditated, executed with patience and careful timing. There was no recklessness, no sloppy mistakes. The RV, once thought to be a mere vehicle, revealed itself as a mobile base of operations equipped for secrecy, control, and concealment. Even more disturbing was the psychological insight gleaned from his journals and collected items. He exhibited traits consistent with extreme manipulation, a lack of empathy, and a deep need for control. Victims were not random, they were chosen, observed, and evaluated long before he made a move. Each disappearance was cataloged, analyzed, and remembered in obsessive detail. He had created a personal system for understanding and controlling the people he targeted, reducing them to objects in a cruel, self-imposed hierarchy. Forensic experts noted that his ability to mask his intentions was exceptional, explaining why he had evaded suspicion for so long despite a pattern of crimes that spanned multiple jurisdictions. The investigation also uncovered fragments of his past that hinted at the origins of his behavior. Family records, school history, and interviews with acquaintances suggested early tendencies toward manipulation and secrecy. Though nothing could excuse his actions, it became clear that the seeds of his predatory nature had been planted decades earlier. Over time, they had grown into a chilling combination of intelligence, patience, and cruelty, all funneled into a life carefully constructed to appear normal while enabling unimaginable acts. By the time authorities pieced together this profile, the realization had settled in. They were dealing with someone extraordinarily dangerous. He was not a criminal who made mistakes. He was a predator who had mastered the art of invisibility. The RV was no longer just a vehicle, it was a lens through which his twisted mind could be understood, a window into the calculated darkness he carried with him wherever he went. Every discovery brought a deeper understanding of the man's methods, but also a rising sense of dread that the full extent of his crimes might never be fully known. For weeks, the investigation seemed to stall. The predator had been careful, leaving behind almost no trace that could directly link him to his crimes. Each lead took the officers to dead ends. Each tip seemed promising until it fizzled into nothing. The frustration was immense, and the sense of urgency grew with every passing day. Authorities knew that someone so meticulous would continue planning, always on the move, always searching for the next victim. Time was no longer just a factor, it was a weapon in his hands. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, from something small and easily overlooked. During a detailed forensic sweep of the RV, investigators discovered a single strand of hair on a hidden cushion. At first, it seemed insignificant, a trace that could have been old or unrelated. But forensic technology had advanced to a point where even this tiny clue could yield results. DNA testing matched it to an unsolved case from a neighboring county, a child who had disappeared more than a year earlier. Suddenly, the seemingly isolated disappearances were connected, forming a web that stretched across towns and counties. With this confirmation, the investigators shifted strategy. They began analyzing the predator's movements, using digital footprints to track his online activity and travel patterns. Social media posts, forum interactions, and subtle location tags painted a picture of a man who had not only been planning crimes for years but had also cultivated a network of unwitting accomplices. People he had never met were unknowingly aiding him, sharing information or observing patterns that he could exploit. Each connection, each digital footprint brought him into sharper focus, revealing a predator who had become increasingly confident in his ability to remain invisible. The evidence indicated that he had a planned route, one that suggested he was targeting his next potential victim. The urgency of the situation escalated, task forces were mobilized, surveillance intensified, and officers prepared for a carefully coordinated operation. Every detail of the predator's habits, every routine noted in his journals, was analyzed to predict his next move. It became a high-stakes game of anticipation. One misstep, and another life could be lost. The day of the operation was tense and precise. Officers waited silently near the RV's usual locations, monitoring for any sign of activity. When he appeared, his behavior was eerily calm, almost as if he had anticipated the authorities' presence. Yet, the meticulous planning that had allowed him to evade capture for so long now became a vulnerability. The trap, built on months of forensic work and digital analysis, closed in on him with timing and precision. He was arrested without incident, his composure never faltering, leaving officers to confront the terrifying realization that they had finally caught a man who had caused immeasurable harm while remaining a master of disguise. Even after the arrest, questions remained. The extent of his network, the number of potential victims, and the depth of his planning left a lingering unease. The breakthrough had saved lives and prevented future crimes, but it also revealed just how sophisticated and calculating the predator had been. The operation marked a turning point in the investigation, moving from desperate pursuit to controlled containment, proving that even the most careful predator could eventually be caught when determination and technology worked together. The arrest of the predator marked the end of a long and exhausting pursuit, but it was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning. In the aftermath, authorities faced the enormous task of untangling years of meticulously hidden crimes. The RV, once a vehicle of freedom and terror, had become a grim archive of the predator's life, a mobile monument to his depravity. Every hidden compartment, every photograph, and every journal page told a story that investigators had to document, catalog, and ultimately use to bring justice for the victims he had targeted. Families of missing children were finally given answers, though those answers came with a heavy burden. Relics of lost innocence, shoes, toys, and personal belongings recovered from the RV were returned to their loved ones, each item a painful reminder of what had been taken. The impact of the predator's actions was clear. Lives had been irreversibly altered, communities had been shaken, and the trust that people placed in the world around them had been violated. Yet amidst the grief and horror, there was a sense of closure, a confirmation that the person responsible had been found and would face consequences. The trial that followed revealed the full extent of the predator's crimes to the public. The media coverage was relentless, but it could not capture the chilling reality of his calculated cruelty. Court documents detailed the years of planning, the obsessive documentation of victims, and the cold, methodical execution of his crimes. Experts testified about the psychological complexity of his actions, describing him as a man who had lived in plain sight while orchestrating horrors that defied belief. The community struggled to comprehend that someone so ordinary in appearance could harbor such darkness within. Throughout the trial, the RV remained central to the story. It was more than evidence. It was a symbol of the predator's mobility, cunning, and the lengths he went to remain undetected. Investigators noted that he had designed every aspect of the vehicle with secrecy in mind, creating hidden spaces, false walls, and routines that allowed him to move freely across towns without drawing attention. The RV had been a home, a lair, and a prison all at once, a single location that encapsulated years of terror. Its exposure forced a reckoning, both for law enforcement and for the wider public, about how easily evil could hide behind ordinary appearances. Even with the predator behind bars, the story left lingering questions. How many potential victims had gone unnoticed? How many communities had been unknowingly touched by his presence? The case became a stark reminder that vigilance, technology, and persistent investigation are crucial in uncovering predators who operate in secrecy. It also revealed the resilience of the law enforcement teams who refused to give up, who followed small clues, and who ultimately turned a trail of horror into a path to justice. In the end, the RV of horrors became a cautionary tale, a reminder that danger can lurk in plain sight and that even the most calculated predator can be stopped. Justice was served, but the memory of what had been uncovered lingered, leaving a permanent mark on everyone involved. The story concluded with a sobering truth: evil can hide anywhere, but persistence, courage, and careful investigation can expose it, even in the most unexpected places. The predator's reign had ended, but the lessons of the RV endured, a chilling testament to the vigilance required to protect the innocent.